So when I think about things that aren't fair, looking at the demographic here, sorry to say some of our younger ones are missing today. You might not relate to this quite so well. Might have to think back. But who remembers doing group projects? Yeah. Now, do you feel like group projects are a good thing or a bad thing? Bad? Sorry, depends who's in your group. Yeah. So when I think about group projects, there are different kinds of members in the group. So what kind of stereotypical group members can you think of that might be in your group? Just call them out. The bossy leader, yep. Someone who's organised, yep. Sorry, what was that? The lazy bones in the group, just wants everyone else to do the work. Anybody else in the group? Sorry, I heard something. The creative one? Yep, and I think there's often someone who's just there to distract you all by doing anything else but the group project as well. So that's what I've come up with here. So we've got somebody who takes charge, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. We've got the worker who just wants to get in and get it done. The distractor who's there trying to tell you all about other stuff. And yeah, I think I should have used the lazy one there. I've used the bludger. And if you're there sitting there, is anyone sitting here thinking, I really like group projects? Is anyone there? Well, you have to question yourself which one of those you are if you really like group projects. I won't say any more. So, but why do we not like these group projects? What's the worst thing about it? Sorry, Tanya? Fairness? Sorry, Colleen. Fairness, yeah. And, maybe it's working with other people that you don't like, full stop. But I think the worst thing about it is that we all get the same grade at the end of this project. And that really doesn't feel fair. Although I can tell you that this world's become more politically correct than it used to be, because now I run a subject at Macquarie Uni, and you can't just give everyone the same mark. You've got to give them a survey at the end of every assessment to say how well their other group members worked and whether they contributed and whether they thought they did more than the others. And you have to adjust their marks according to what they've done now. So gone are the good old days when you just could give everyone the same mark. So it would feel a bit lousy, though, ratting on your group members saying they didn't do anything unless it was really obvious. But there's a story just like this in the Bible, and Tanya alluded to it this morning in her children's story, but we're going to read it together. And it's from Matthew chapter 20, and we'll start from verse 1. So first of all, we have Jesus telling a parable, and he says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire labourers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the labourers for the wage, a denarius, he sent them into the vineyard." And I found a picture of a denarius here. There's the front and the back with a nice picture of Mark Antony on it. And I've looked up a denarius, according to the amount of silver in it, would be worth less than $1 today. But I'm sure if you had a denarius, it would probably be a collector's item and worth a whole lot more than $1 today. But a lot of Bibles would translate that as being they agreed on a day's wage, which is a common consensus. But one person had investigated the value of a denarius in the time of Jesus and actually believes that that was a very generous day's wage. That was more like several days' wage. So they'd agreed on this wage, and it was a good wage, basically, that would mean that the person who was working could afford to buy food and provide for their family. And in the time of Jesus, you couldn't, pay someone fortnightly. You had to pay them the day that they worked. That was the rules. And the reason for that is so that that person could be assured that they could afford food and shelter and wouldn't have to wait for that. And then he didn't stop with just those workers. The landowner, about 9 o'clock, went out, he saw some others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is righteous." So they went. He went out again about noon, and about 3:00 he did the same. And then about 5:00 he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." And once again, it might just say in your Bible that he said he'd pay them whatever is fair or whatever is right. The actual original word it uses is that he would pay them whatever is righteous. And they would have understood what that meant, because back in that day, if you did an hour's work, you'd be paid for more than an hour, because it would be considered that, coming into work, you're giving up other opportunities. So you would get several hours pay, even for just working a very short time. So they knew that they wouldn't get a whole day's pay, most likely, but that they would be paid something to compensate them fairly for having come out there for that time. It was, once again, the kind of the rules of that time. And later on in the passage, the landowner uses the phrase, "Are you upset because I'm good?" And the reason he's saying this is he's a good Israelite. He's following the rules that will mean that he's very well respected in the community by paying people what's fair. If they're there, only for an hour or two, he still gives them a decent wage for bothering to show up. But then, when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the manager, "Call the labourers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5:00 came, each of them received a denarius. And now when they first came, they thought they would receive... when the first people came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." And I think this could have read very differently. Imagine if this landowner had paid the people who he'd hired first in the morning. They'd be really excited because, this was a decent day's wage. This was actually a pretty good day's wage. They could go home and provide really well for their family with that. They would have gone home really happy. Then he paid the people who come next, and when he paid them the same amount, they would have been really happy. And then when he paid the people next, they would have been ecstatic, and the last people would have just been overjoyed. But instead, he does this really strange thing where he pays the last people first and the first people last, so that everybody knows that everyone has got the same. So he's really kind of rubbing it in here. He's really showing them what he's doing. And they don't like it. And I think when we read it, I don't know if we like this parable either when we first read it. It kind of irks us a little bit. And I think that's a bit deliberate. Then he goes on, the landowner replies to them, "Friend, I did not treat you unjustly. Did you not agree with me to work for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. And I choose to give to this last, the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or is your eye evil because you are good?" And once again, this is something you'll probably miss in depending on what translation of the Bible you've got. He'll probably say, "You're jealous because I'm good." But he actually uses this phrase, accusing them of giving him the evil eye. Now, I know we often joke, if looks could kill, or if someone gave you the death stare. But in that time, I actually brought something this morning, just a moment. The archaeology of that time actually shows that there is a lot of amulets and little trinkets. You probably can't see this very well at all, but like that one up there, that are to ward off the evil eye. Because I've got a list here of people who could give you the evil eye. And basically, it was a belief, very common belief, that just by looking at you or looking at something that you owned, an animal or a possession, that they could somehow curse that or affect you physically just by looking at you. Now, you'll have to be very suspicious of people here this morning as you leave, I think, because I think there are several people here who could give you the evil eye according to this. So, widows. Got to watch out for the widows. Yep, got one up the back. Disabled people or people with any physical deformity. Don't think you're going to be left out of here. Envious neighbours. People with vision problems. I don't know how they give you the evil eye if they can't see you, but just got to watch them. Now, this one, I don't know if we've got any of these here or not, but you can have a look, check everyone out on your way out. People with one eyebrow, joined eyebrows. Strangers, exotic people, enemies, epileptics. So, especially if you were wealthy, you'd have to watch out. You'd have to hide your possessions so that people couldn't see them because they might give it the evil eye. Or you'd have to kind of conceal your wealth. And you may notice still, apparently someone recently surveyed about 186 cultures and found that over a third of them still have quite strong beliefs about the evil eye. So things you can do to protect yourself is, don't look people in the eye, hide your stuff. You can wear protective devices, like you can wear strings of knots apparently, or blue or red coloured cloth. So some of you are okay. I'm wearing blue today, you see, to protect myself. You could wear sacks of herbs, some rue or some garlic in a sack around your neck. That helps. And you could spit in their presence or do certain gestures. So it's quite intriguing. So this landowner is saying to people, are you giving me the evil eye because I'm good, because I'm a good Israelite? You're giving me the evil eye. And that's just a bit of an interesting insight into that. But then we look at the beginning of this parable, right back in verse 1. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like this. So, is like this parable. So the landowner's behaviour is kind of really weird to us. But there's something about the kingdom of heaven that's like this. And the first thing we can really tell is that the kingdom of heaven is obviously a bit different to the kingdom of this world because, this landowner's just acting really strange. And the big message of this parable is really that it's not about what we do. It's not about whether we worked all day or, worked for a little bit. It's not actually about us. It's not about what we do. It's all about the gift from the landowner in the story, or our gift from God of his grace and his life. And Matthew, in the previous chapters to this, has made this quite clear. He's used several different illustrations to show that it's really not about us. It's really all about what God's done for us. And the first parable he uses is the rich young man in Matthew 19. And this guy comes up to Jesus and says, what have I got to do to get eternal life? And Jesus says, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, I've kept all of the commandments. And then Jesus tells him to sell everything he has, and the guy gets really sad because this guy... Sorry, I'm lost here. This guy's done everything right, and he's really trusted in his own ability to provide and to achieve. And this is what Jesus is challenging him by asking him to sell it all. He's challenging him to base his identity on something other than his own achievements. And that's really just hammering home this point that we can't earn it. It's not about our work. And he goes on with another parable about the unforgiving servant. And here we have a ruler that's wanting to settle accounts with his servants. And one of them owes the ruler, several years' worth of wages. And the ruler cancels his debt, but then that servant goes out and imprisons somebody who owes him several months' worth of wages. And it doesn't end well for the first servant. But once again, the point of that is just God's grace and the fact that we've been forgiven so much and that we are completely undeserving of what God's given us. So we can't really look at others and point out the fault in them when we've been forgiven so much ourselves. And we have the parable of the lost sheep, which really just shows that the heart of God is to just save every single one of us. God doesn't want anybody to be left out of his love and his grace. He doesn't want to lose any of us. God's heart is that every single person be saved. And you've got to think about that landowner in the parable. Like, was he just not actually a very good manager? Like, did he not realise how much work there was in his vineyard to do? Did he go out and get some people and then realise, that's not enough, I went and got more? Or was it his heart that he wanted to bless the people in the community? Was it his heart that he wanted to see these people have what they needed for life, to buy food and shelter? And here in the parable of the lost sheep, we see God's heart, that he wants all of us to have that life. And last of all, we have Matthew records Jesus saying, "Come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden." And God's saying, it's not about what you do. Stop trying so hard to please me and just relate to me. I want to know you and I want you to accept what I've done. And of course, this is backed up through the rest of the Bible. God's grace is so completely not fair, but I'm very glad that it's not fair. In Ephesians, we read, "For by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It's the gift of God. It's not the result of works, so that no one can boast." And so we can see that this is God's beautiful gift to us. It's got nothing to do with us. And so I wonder, when you read that parable, who you most identify with. Are you with those first workers thinking, man, I'm pretty good here. I've been doing a great job, God. But that other bloke, why do they deserve you? They don't deserve you. They're, you should see what they did last Sabbath, Thinking that somehow we deserve God's grace and other people don't. It sounds pompous to say that, but I think sometimes if we examine our thoughts, we kind of get to thinking that way when we look at other people, and especially people who might have wronged us in the past. We might have trouble believing that they deserve God's grace. Or are we working hard to try to impress God? Are we just out there, thinking, if I work really hard, I'll be okay and God will reward me? Both of those first two options are just as messed up as each other. They really are. That's just not how it works in God's kingdom. Or are we like those workers who got there at 5 o'clock and got their denarius? What do you think they were feeling? Must have just been in disbelief, like just waiting for him to change his mind and take it back. I hope that we're like them, that we're just so blown away by God's goodness and his generosity that we're just constantly just feeling that thankfulness and that almost disbelief that it can be true. That's how good God is. And I read a quote that I actually thought summed it all up pretty well, so I'm just going to read it out to you. No one ever deserves God's love. God's invitation is offered to all without strings, and his acceptance of those who respond, whenever they decide to do so, is totally unmerited by their behaviour. But this approach is totally alien to the whole idea of deserving or meriting a reward. And in fact, that idea encourages the attitude that serving God is a laborious chore, which we need to be compensated for. On the contrary, what is central to the good news is that it's an incredible gift. So as you go from here today, I just really challenge you to just think about what an incredible gift you've received from God. And just be really thanking him for that. And just asking him to show you how you can share that gift with others. And let's just pray together now, and then I believe someone's going to come up and do a blessing. God, I just thank you that you don't treat us how we deserve, but that you treat us out of your abounding riches of grace and love. And Lord, I just ask that you'll make us so aware of that this week. And that, Lord, that we might be keen to see others experience that grace and love for themselves as well.